Welcome to the What's Your Truth podcast, the show that not only showcases the best of independent artists, but also explores what inspires them, what drives them, and what they consider their fundamental purpose as an artist to be. Today on the show, we have Dale LaDuke. Born and raised in Detroit and relocated to Southern California, Dale is an award-winning songwriter and vocalist known for his vast instrumental talents. A writer across multiple genres, Dale is proficient in guitar, ukulele, accordion, keys, bass, and trumpet, which is pretty damn impressive array of instruments. Um, in terms of bands, Dale was a founding member of SoCal country band Five Wheel Drive, which was a top 5 finalist in Yahoo's Best Unsigned Band contest. And they were the only group to have songs in 6 of the top 10 slots on mp3.com that year. Then in 2009, Dale co-founded the American Celtic group Caedmon, whose single My Love was a top pick by Music Connection magazine. And again, this was in 2009. Pretty impressive. And then there's Dale LaDuke, the solo artist. As I mentioned earlier, Dale is an award-winning songwriter and vocalist. His accolades include taking 4th place in the 2006 Unisong Song Contest and being a finalist in the LA Music Awards in 2008, the 2009 Independent Singer-Songwriter Awards, and the 2010 Hollywood Music and Media Awards. He's also been a top finalist in the Jazz Singer category for the John Lennon Songwriter Contest, and his song De Los Angeles from his album Lone Ranger placed very highly in the 2013 IFF World Fest Houston Awards, and also took the Platinum Remmy Award that same year. In other words, Dale is a badass. Currently, Dale can be heard with his Beatles tribute band, the B-Tunes, as well as their acoustic offshoot, Yesterday and Today. Dale also hosts the Therapy at the Roar Room open mics every Tuesday night in Glendale, where you can find the best of local underground talent on a regular basis. And I've been to the Roar Room, and I can say that that is true. It's kind of incredible, some of the talent that comes through there. Dale is a man that never sleeps, a true professional at what he does, and an artist to the core. It's an honor to have him on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, Dale LaDuke.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I know you're a busy man, so I appreciate your time.
Sure, of course.
Well, shall we roll with it? Oh, absolutely. Shall we begin?
Go for it.
Wonderful. So my first question is, how did you decide you wanted to become a musician?
Well, I wasn't very good at much else. In school, I was a poor student. I wasn't a very good athlete. And ironically, trumpet was my first instrument. I picked it up in the 5th grade, and I was usually last chair or second to the last chair trumpet all through junior high school, and into college. And I really didn't discover music that I could make my own until on a lark, I joined the choir in high school and found out that I had the best voice in the school. And I actually had the lowest and the highest voice in the school. And I made the Michigan State Choir as a second bass in my junior year and as a first tenor in my senior year, which I don't think is still to this day has ever been done before, since.
Yeah, that's a big deal, man. And it's interesting too. One of the common things that I've noticed, and it's cool hearing your story on this, is that a lot of artists, it seems like that it wasn't like a straight line from here's me starting and now I know exactly where I'm going with music. It's like this kind of interesting crooked path, almost like, well, I'm on trumpet, now I'm going to do this, now I'm going to do that, and you're finding out what you're into all the way along. That's really key, I think, for people to understand.
It's true.
It's usually how it goes.
That's true. Had I just stuck with trumpet, music may not have been my vocation, because I wasn't that great at it, even though I still play it to this day. And I'm so glad that I have that little extra tool in my toolbox, which is fun. It's fun. But because I began singing a lot, I started writing songs almost immediately and learning piano around the same time. And then it just took off, it just took off from there. I got in bands and the usual trajectory.
Right. Right on.
Hmm.
And then what was the first experience you remember having with music?
Period.
Yeah.
Well, my father was a traveling salesman, and we crisscrossed the country. Um, I think we lived in 19 homes before I was 10 years old. Yeah.
Boy.
And my parents loved music. And so we would, this is the days of Route 66. And so we would cross the country and we would sing. That's what we would do. We would sing in the car. Some of my earliest memories is my mom and dad singing, "Gonna take a sentimental journey, gonna tell my heart at ease," or "Blue moon, I saw her standing alone." Those are my earliest. I was probably 5 or 6 at the time.
That's so awesome. Well, and it's so cool that you had a family that was nurturing of that. I mean, it's a really interesting thing. I don't know that it directly correlates, but I mean, I'm sure that the more supportive a parent is and the more understanding they are of music, even in general, that's got to make it easier for you to then spread your wings and do what you do. So that's again a common thing I've found with the people that tend to be doing better in it, is that it was nurtured from the beginning for the most part.
Yes, I agree. I agree with you as a rule. My situation was a little different because my parents split up when I was 10, and my stepfather, my next father,
Hmm.
didn't like music,
Oh,
or he didn't like practicing. He didn't like to hear practicing. So I wasn't allowed to play when he was home.
oh,
So I
gee,
had to sneak practicing.
wow.
Yeah. So that was that was not conducive to my growth.
Agreed, it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
And but you also persevered through it, which is awesome. So that's great.
Thank you.
Now, yeah, absolutely. Now, who are the biggest influences on your work and why?
Well, I am in a Beatles tribute band.
Fair
So,
point. Presumably, the Beatles had something to do with where you are.
yes. They were probably my biggest influence and still are. Um, there's just not that many examples in history where you can get 4 young guys that happen to be, well, 2 of them certifiable geniuses, and from a little industrial dockyard, in this little town in blue collar England, um, show up at the same skiffle concert when they're like 14, 15 years old and meet, and turns out these 2 individuals would change the world.
Literally, yeah.
Literally. And then just so happens they knew George Harrison, who is, maybe 1 tier below them. Uh, and then even Ringo, in his own way, revolutionized pop drumming. Just the 4 of them together were greater than the sum of their parts, but their parts were unbelievable.
Yeah. No, it's true. And I'm glad you brought that up about Ringo, about he in a way did revolutionize things. I mean, just as a side note, because I don't get heated about this, but it bugs me when I hear people bag on Ringo. Because I'm like, you realize that if he wasn't there holding them together, they wouldn't have sounded half as good as they did. Because he really was. I mean, he was a metronome first and a showman second, which is so important. But he was also
Yep.
very nuanced and tasteful in his playing. And he really did. I mean, revolutionize. I've never thought of it in those terms, but you're so right. He definitely revolutionized what pop drumming was and what it became.
One of the things that he did that all four of them did is they wrote their parts to the song.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't play stock parts. None of them did.
Right.
They wrote parts like an orchestrator would. Especially Paul, but all of them to some degree. Yeah. And Ringo's no exception. He wrote drum parts specifically for a specific song. Wouldn't have fit in a different song, probably.
Interesting. That's very true, and I've never really thought of that. But thinking back to some of the Beatles tunes, I know that's totally correct. You really can't swap out those drum lines. They're really unique.
Yeah,
like they're crafted for that song. That's really a great point.
And that's why it's so hard to find a good Ringo drummer.
Right. They try to do the stock thing and they try to phone it in, and you just can't. They have to actually know Ringo.
I don't care how good a drummer you are. That's your point is well taken. Exactly.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So what's the weirdest thing that's ever inspired you?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. The weirdest thing that's ever inspired me. Well, I mean, I'm a fan of all music. Zappa, Mahavishnu Orchestra. I love jazz and jazz fusion. Right now, I have some real favorites on the internet, which are so far removed from what I do, which is Jacob Collier. Is an inspiration to millions of people now. He's maybe he's in the running for the most talented guy on the planet. And then there's Justin Lee Schwartz, who's the new kid in town, who might be dethroning Jacob Collier.
Wow.
Yeah. I recommend both those guys. Go down their rabbit hole. They will blow your minds. Jacob Collier and Justin Lee Schwartz.
Right on. And I love you that you're, you can tell that you're very open about promoting other artists too, which I think is also very cool and kind of an underlying viewpoint that a lot of artists miss, is like the promoting and helping each other aspect of being an artist, and really looking at your fellow artists as fellow artists and not as your competition, because it's not really how it works in the art world if you're doing it right, in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. So how has your art influenced other people?
Another good question. I'm probably not the best person qualified to answer that question. I have a small circle of fans of my songwriting. That I have certain songs that are, I guess, loved by a certain group of people. But I don't know if any of them have actually sat me down and told me why, what the effect it had on them. Because I'm a founding member of the Beatles band, we've been together 15 years now. I certainly had an influence on my fellow bandmates. As you probably know, as anyone that's been in a band knows, it may be the hardest thing to do is to keep a band together. It's a marriage of four musicians, which is
volatile at times.
Yes, good word for it. But so for us to be together for 15 years, it's I consider that an accomplishment, and I attribute it to the personalities of everyone in the group.
Right on.
Yeah.
Good. And that's a great answer too, by the way. I think that's also too something that is easy to overlook, that, like when I ask this question to people, they tend to think, about fans, people that have heard the music, people that have messaged them saying, hey, this music made this impact. But there is a definite internal influence between you and the people that you create with. And I've experienced that too, where it's like any band I'm in, I always get something from the guys in the band. I always learn something. I always become influenced by them just by default. I just do, and it's always awesome. So I'm really glad you brought that up in those terms, because
That's
it's an easy thing to overlook.
well, it's true. I mean, art can be a very solitary endeavor, especially other art forms, but even music. At time, you spend a lot of time in your room by yourself.
Sure.
If you're a musician, and we all know, we've all encountered narcissism and egos, and and if you ever combine that, especially when we were younger, with substance abuse, and it can be really daunting to try to not let it shatter the group,
Yeah.
shatter your project, explode your project, which we've all experienced, and don't want to do that again.
Yeah, that's the key thing, is not repeating your mistakes, for sure.
Right. And so that's why it's almost as important to find people that share your philosophy on how to get along with each other and how to maintain a business relationship, as it is how talented they are.
Yeah.
I mean, in equal measure, I would look for both of those things.
Yeah. No, absolutely. That's very well put. I mean, the one thing is too, like, talent can be drilled and taught. You can't really teach a person to have a different personality. Not really. They have to be their own choice to do it. It's not the kind of thing you can just drill them through. So
You hope that life does that.
yeah, you would hope.
Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit, do you have any pre-show or pre-studio rituals?
I always have to warm up my voice. As I get older, I have to do pre-warm-ups longer to keep hitting to keep the range that I have. I tend to sing a lot of the McCartney stuff and the high harmonies,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the first thing to go, usually in a male voice.
Yeah.
And a female voice too, probably, as you get older.
Yeah, I would imagine that's probably the case.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay.
So
Good.
I have to put attention on my diet. I can't eat a lot of inflammatory foods. Like a lot of sugar will is detrimental to my vocal cords. You just got to look at it like an athlete would.
Absolutely. And I've heard that analogy before, and it's totally true. I mean, when your body is your instrument, yeah, you got to keep it in shape. You've got to keep it fit, and you really do have to treat it like an athlete would treat their body for what they were doing.
And I learned that by listening to interviews with Katie Lang and Tony Bennett and Patti LaBelle. They all say the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes full sense. And yeah, I've heard several other professionals say similarly, including my vocal coach before she passed away. That was always part of what she said was, treat it like you would treat an athlete, because it is your instrument.
Was that Jeannie Diva?
It was. Yep, I studied with Jeannie.
She was great. I have her warm-up CD.
Mm-hmm.
She's responsible for me doing warm-ups.
Oh, really?
Because I never studied with her, but I got a hold of her warm-up CD, and I used that religiously for years.
Yeah. Which is funny you bring that up, because that's exactly what I use when I warm up and cool down my voice, is that CD. I had a gig on Saturday, and I was doing that, and before the gig, every gig, studio, whatever, and that stuff's incredible.
She was quite a woman.
Yes, she was. I wish you had gotten to study with her, because man, it was a whole other level. Like, God, she was brilliant.
Yeah.
But alas. Yes. So, what risks, if any, have you personally taken for the sake of your music?
Other than the obvious, uh, living a Spartan life.
Fair.
If you make that take that fork in the road and decide to do this as a profession, you sacrifice a lot of the you know the middle class accoutrements that one might have had.
Very
Uh,
true.
when I was 19, I was a large press operator in a Detroit Chrysler plant, and I remember all the signs in the factory were 30 years and out, 30 years and out, and a lot of my friends, that's what they did. 30 years in the auto factory. When you're from Detroit, that's like the pinnacle. That's You hit the holy grail if you get into the big three,
Mhm.
and in the, and you could have a nice life. Uh, but I only lasted a year in the Chrysler plant, and I've happily sacrificed a lot of the benefits for the freedom. What you gain, what you in exchange for what you lose, you get a certain amount of freedom to live this lifestyle. So
Definitely. Yeah,
yeah,
and that's another fantastic point of like, people often I think have a misconception and I mean, I've been this guy. Freedom means it's easier. Well, no, it means you got to be more responsible because you got more freedom. There's no guardrails, and so I mean, even as like anyone that does anything is their own business versus going to work for someone. You no longer have the structure of an organization. You have to build that. So it's like, are you more free? Yeah. Do you also have more to do to maintain that? Absolutely. So I just love that you brought that up that way as well, and that's a great message too for people. Like it's the fact of it not being easy is actually not incorrect. It's not a bad thing. It's just what it is. If it were easy, you're probably doing it wrong, and you're probably not getting where you think you're going.
that's right.
Yeah, right on.
A very good point.
Yeah. And then
Mhm.
what's the craziest risk you've ever seen another artist take for their craft?
Well, I've seen some crazy artists, but I'm not sure it was always for their craft. Um,
Fair.
well, I mean, I've had friends that practiced 10 hours a day when they were 11 years old,
Hmm.
and all their friends were out, including me, riding bicycles and tearing up the neighborhood and playing baseball, and they were in their room practicing 10 hours a day, and of course by the time they were in high school they were the hot um, monsters, musicians that everybody wanted to play with,
Right.
and some of them are still at it. Some of them are still at it. Some of them aren't. But I was always in awe of those guys.
Yeah, I've known a few guys like that. Like I knew a kid. I don't know if you knew Zach Banks or know Zach Banks, but
I know who he is. I know
yeah,
who
it's
he
just incredible guitarist, and that was what he did as a kid. He would literally practice for like 6 to 8 hours a day, no fail, 7 days a week. If they were driving somewhere in the car, the guitar was in the car with
right,
him. He was backseat practicing. It didn't matter. And oh my God, within a few years, that kid was such a shredder.
right.
Um, and really nice guy too. But yeah, I've seen that, and it's a sacrifice, especially at that age, to sacrifice literally your social life. That's like everything to a kid.
I know.
And again, really interesting that you took it there. When people answer this question, it tends to be stuff more in your adult years and less in the formative years. And that's a really great point as well. Is that young people sacrifice too. And when you know, for sure.
That's true. But here, the one thing I did learn from those people, I used to teach at a music school um, years ago, and the owner of the school had a plaque above the door. It said, every great musician practiced 10 hours a day for some 2-year period of his life. Didn't matter if the 2-year period was when he was 11 and 13 or 65 to 67. Just need 2 years.
Wow. 2 years, 10 hours a day. That definitely seems like it would make a musician out of anybody at any instrument if they were really applying themselves to it. So, no, I can definitely see that. And wow, I mean, it gives you a sense. That's the magnitude if you want to be at the top of the heap. And if that doesn't scare you and if it makes you feel challenged, then you should probably go for it. That's for you. If it scares the hell out of you to hear that, this is probably not your thing.
Well, it kind of aligns with that datum that any professional, any master at any profession needs 10,000 hours.
That's right.
So it kind of aligns with that.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it made me think of as the 10,000-hour rule, 100%.
Right.
So Dale, what's one thing about you that would shock everyone to know?
I'm the oldest of 9 children.
Okay.
My grandmother was 13 of 18 children.
Wow. Holy God, that's a lot of kids.
Same 2 parents.
Boy. Yeah. Okay, good. Right on. So you are from a very big family for sure.
Irish Catholics.
I was going to say, it sounds about Irish Catholic. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what is the one thing or the one tool that you absolutely cannot live without as an artist, and why?
About 12 years ago, I bought a Kurzweil K6100. I think that's what it is. It's K6100. It's back here. Which is obsolete now, and you can't find them anywhere. But it has been my go-to keyboard all these years, and I cannot find anything to replace it. And I'm scared because it's starting to fail.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's starting to fail. And so I'm seriously trying to find something that would replace it. But it is so, well, especially with the Beatles band, it has features that the Kurzweils don't have anymore. And I just can't live without. So that's one thing. That's one thing. The other thing is, as you mentioned, the guitar player from the Beatles band and I have an acoustic duo, and we actually play more. I mean, that's my main gig is our duo.
Really?
Yeah, we play a lot. It's easier to book. It's easier to book a duo.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Interesting. Again, that's an interesting look too, though. It's but funnily enough, I'm kind of getting experience with that too. I'm booking again for myself recently, and you're right. It is actually a lot easier to book a small acoustic act than it is to book a whole band. There's a lot more places to look for that kind of thing, for sure. For sure. So, what has been the most difficult piece of music for you to create, and why?
Do you mean write? To write?
Whatever level of creation, whatever speaks to you, whatever makes sense to you.
I mean, there's certain things in the Beatles band that are challenging, because I play a lot of the keyboard and orchestration stuff, and but I would say my most challenging music assignment to date is I sub sometimes for a Sting Police tribute band, and have to do the keyboards and the orchestration, a lot of the orchestration in those for for those songs. And that can be pretty intense. It's a very good band, good Sting tribute band, and faithfully recreate those incredible records.
Yes.
And so I've burned the midnight oil learning those parts.
Right on.
But it's been really rewarding too.
Yeah. Well, again, that's the whole other level of learning, just duplicating what those guys were doing. I mean, that's a lesson unto itself for sure that you can take and, utilize within whatever you're doing.
Yeah.
Percent. So here's a fun question for you. If you were going to write a book about your career up to this point, what would you title it?
I am writing a book.
Oh, are you really?
Yeah.
Well, what's it called?
I can't say yet.
Okay.
I'm a few months away from being able to announce it.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah, it is.
Well, then feel free to not answer this question because I don't want to compromise your any kind of agreements or any kind of surprises that would be. I don't want you releasing things early by any means. So, unless you have an alternate title concept, which you can feel free to voice that if you'd like.
Well, it's my autobiography.
Oh, cool.
Let's just say that.
Right on.
Mhm.
Okay, great. And then I have two more questions for you. First one is, what are your plans for world domination?
My plans are very different now than they were when I was 20 years old.
Fair. So they're different than they were 10 years ago. Got that.
Yeah. I'm going to be 69 next month.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah.
Wow. You don't look at my man. Whatever you're doing, it's working.
Thank you. Well, my dad is still sharp as a tack and going strong and driving, and he's going to be 95 this year.
Wow.
Yeah. He's
That's
doing
nice.
great. Both my parents are doing great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I come from good stock. My grandfather was 98 when he passed, and my grandmother 92, and yeah. What I don't know what they smoked a lot and drank a lot and fooled around a lot. So they were pretty crazy. I just, because we already talked about having to pay attention to your health as you get older.
Sure.
If you want to keep performing, that obviously works in my favor in the long run as well. So
Right on.
yeah.
Very cool. And then my last question for you, and just to revisit the introduction to the show not only showcases the best of independent artists, it also explores what inspires them, what drives them, and what they consider their fundamental purpose as an artist to be. So, Dale, what's your truth?
We don't get asked these questions very often. So
I noticed. That's why I started the show.
I'm glad you did. It's needed.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're doing a valuable service.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sure. Well, the world is a crazy place, and it always has been, and it's getting crazier.
Yep.
I don't think humans are necessarily getting crazier. It's just that the speed of the particle flow and the communication has accelerated to such a extent that we get no rest anymore from it. We are bombarded 24/7 now from all sides, and anything we can do to get people to stop just for 2 minutes and just let something come in and wash over them and create a peaceful happy, or sad, some effect that moves them to tears, laughter, um, something bigger than themselves. Uh, I think that's the point of art in general. And we're all on the same team here.
Absolutely. And wow, what an incredible viewpoint. Thank you for that.
You're
Um, yeah, I feel like that's a really important thing again for people to hear and to understand and really take that look of like art is kind of, it's funny. I think it was Kurt Vonnegut that said art is basically what makes the living in this world bearable. You know, it's what actually, it's one of those things that just gets you through and it's healing, you know, uh,
Yes.
when it's really done with the intention to help and the intention to just purely create, you know, I mean, we could talk for hours about art that's been put out there for the purpose of destroying and it's not really art and things like that. But, um, you know, but things that are put out there with the purpose of actually like as an artist, what you do is valuable for that reason, you know, and that includes you, of course.
Thank you.
You've been doing it for a long time too. So that's, you know,
Mhm.
to be a little cheesy about it, it's a hell of a lot of healing you've put out there into the world.
Needs it.
It does. No, it does, and it needs more of that, and that's a big part of this show. Is I want people to be inspired to do more of what they're already doing, or to start doing it if they haven't, but they're thinking about it. Like, the world needs more art. It really does. So, incredible way to end the interview. Thank you so much for your time. Before we do end off, I wanted to give you 60 seconds to plug anything you have coming up. Everything Dale LaDuke, fire away.
Well, I am plugging my new video, which is on my website, We the Living. I feel kind of along the lines of what we were just talking about. I really feel strongly about the issue of gun control.
Mhm.
And not that I'm against guns, I'm not. I'm not
Yeah.
against guns, but our mass shootings have reached an epidemic level um, that no one foresaw. I mean, it's 2 years ago we were thinking it was at epidemic level, and now it's so far beyond that. It happens it's like every day. And uh, the song I wrote and the video I made, We the Living, that's on my website, um, DaleLaDuke.com, just addresses that issue. And I'm not saying that I have the answers because I don't. It's a complex, it's a complex issue, but everybody of good faith needs to recognize that whatever we're doing isn't working on so many levels. And I would just encourage, I just would hope people would go to my either on my YouTube page or my website and just listen to the song and watch the video and just hopefully spiritually somehow we can uh, join each other in solidarity around this issue.
Makes sense. Yeah, and I know that's been a big issue, a very polarizing issue. I mean, for a long time, but especially recently, it's been particularly nasty. So I definitely appreciate that sentiment as well of like coming to some term between us all where it's like we're just getting each other's viewpoint and figuring out where to go from here. I think that's very needed, for sure.
Me too.
So well, thank you for that. And again, Dale, thank you so much for being here. My gosh, I learned a lot from talking to you. So thank you for that. And to everyone that's watching, this has been the What's Your Truth podcast. We'll see you on the next one. Later.
Yeah, you follow your own rules and you preach them on to me. But you don't think before you act and you ain't got no business with me. You don't know. But tell me what's your truth? Oh, what's your truth? Now you got down on